On the back of World Food Day, celebrated and commemorated yesterday, today is the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. The COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis as well are reversing decades of progress in the fight against poverty and inequality on the African continent. According to the African Development Bank, 250 million Africans already suffer from hunger. 333 million face severe food insecurity, and Africa's yearly food imports cost nearly $4 billion. As of 2021, 490 million people on the continent are living in extreme poverty, making up approximately 36% of Africa's total population. To explain how the continent can attain the UN Sustainable Development Goal targets, especially when it comes to eradicating poverty by the year 2030, is Southern Africa Resource Watch Executive Director Dr. Claude Kabemba. Dr. Kabemba, very good morning to you. It's very concerning to read through these numbers and also understand that the situation has been further exacerbated by COVID-19. Where do we stand when it comes to the conversation and the implementation on the eradication of poverty?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I think those numbers you have given are very frightening for a continent that has got potential, really, to take its people out of poverty very rapidly. As you know, this is the richest continent when it comes to natural resources. We've got some of the most strategic resources that the world needs. For example, to ensure just a green transition. We've got platinum in South Africa, chrome and manganese. We've got platinum, chrome, manganese, diamonds in Zimbabwe. We've got cobalt, coltan, zinc in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've got bauxite in Guinea, and we've got plenty of other mineral resources. But these resources can be utilized if we to fight poverty, if we change the current model of how we are using them. We only export raw material to the rest of the world when we know that Africa is the continent that needs more of these resources, to consume these resources on this continent. So that model of exporting raw material and importing manufactured goods is keeping Africa where it is, and the fact that we cannot diversify our economy using minerals as a base is a problem. So we need, one, to ensure that we diversify our economies, and we can do it using minerals. We also need to change our mindset. Most of our policies on mining is on monetary policies. But what we need to have is industrial policy. Industrialization will help us to create new jobs to absorb unemployment, especially unemployment of the youth. So those are the type of things that we need to do. We need to increase our local revenue, our local mobilization revenues. Right now, we are not getting enough even in terms of revenues from our minerals. So there is a call for a total mind shift in terms of how we managing our resources.
A mind shift is really essential to the conversation, but when it comes to mind shift for the general public, the people who are at the bottom suffering and suffering from hunger and poverty. I mean, just yesterday we reflected on the impact of world hunger and how that has been exacerbated by COVID-19. As we look at poverty, we cannot ignore the impact of COVID-19.
Oh, yes. I think what COVID-19 has done has been to expose the vulnerability of the continent and its people. Because we depend so much on import of food, we were unable to feed our people. We've seen an increase of of food insecurity on the continent. But what we also saw through COVID-19 is that there was a retreat of the state and the private sector in terms of support for most vulnerable communities, because money has to go to prevention. So COVID-19, if we do not tackle it as soon as possible, it will increase the poverty level and widen the inequalities gap. So COVID-19 is a factor in how we respond to poverty. In fact, it is an opportunity, let me say that, because it starts to challenge us across the board in terms of our strategies and how we respond to certain things on the continent. And one of it is that we need to produce food closely to communities. And I think we have the land that we need to produce sufficient food, and we have one of the best rainy seasons across the continent, and water that can help us to do that. But I think we are not able, because of a lack and inability of our leadership, to be more courageous and to invest more in a pragmatic way in things that resolve our problems than supporting other continents by exporting our raw materials there. Because when we export our minerals, we are exporting our capital, and it's benefiting more other societies than ourselves.
You speak about Africa being the richest continent when it comes to natural resources, and the biggest hiccup there, I suppose one of the biggest hiccups, becomes the implementation and how that process is then managed to ensure that economies are stimulated across the continent. Another really important factor speaks to unemployment, especially youth. Youth across the continent and in South Africa are really on the end here when it comes to access to jobs, when it comes to jobs being created. Even qualified people with degrees are sitting at home without any work. Where do we move? How do we move forward when the very young people in the continent are really bearing the brunt of the poverty?
You are totally correct. And the Southern Africa Resources Watch is invest in the governance of natural resources. We follow very closely what is happening in the extractive industry. And what we are saying is that we've got plans, we've got visions on the continent that has been put together by the head of states. For example, the African Mining Vision, which says that we need to create linkages, backward and forward linkages, that will diversify, that will create industries. And it's only when we start creating small, medium industries around our mining that we can be able to create sufficient jobs to absorb the unemployment that we have. Then we are also saying that when you look at the local content policy that most of our countries have adopted, it's $1 billion industry just to provide services to mining companies. We think that it's important to capture that business for local communities so that they can open small, medium enterprises that can provide services to this mining, a number of mining companies across the continent. All that revenue has been taken away by the same mining companies out of this continent. So we've got sufficient capacity, space to increase our local revenue mobilization. That can then be turned into small industries and providing opportunities to young people. But we've also created a space. We've said we need to push trade between African countries. We cannot integrate without producing. We cannot trade among ourselves without producing goods on the continent. So we need to speed up the process of setting up industries, even in agriculture, agro-processing industries. Those are the things that will absorb unemployment. We will not fight poverty. We will not fight unemployment by following the current model across the continent. It's just not possible. In fact, it's a sin that we can be sitting on such abundant minerals and we have one of the most poor population in the world. It's unacceptable, and that is an indictment to the leadership that we need a more courageous leadership that can take decisive decision to turn around the misfortune that we are experiencing on the continent. If Botswana can add value and cut and polish diamonds in Botswana, and they successfully done it, why will South Africa be failing? Why will Zimbabwe be failing? Why will DRC, why will all these African, Nigeria, Ghana be failing? We have President Paul Kagame in Rwanda, very courageous. We can say whatever we want against President Kagame, but he's more decisive. He has put up a refineries for gold, even if he does not produce gold. He has put up a small industries across the board, and Rwanda is doing well. That's the kind of leadership that we want across our countries.
And very lastly, very quickly before we wrap up, can poverty be eradicated by the year 2030 as in line with the goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development?
Look, we can make a very significant progress by reducing poverty if we are serious. We've got everything we need to really reduce poverty. We don't have excuses to do that. Maybe we might not eradicate poverty, but we would have reduced it very, very extensively. Look, you take the case of China. 1.3 billion people. China has been, for the past 3 decades, China has been taking out of poverty almost 300,000 people a year. We can do it because we've got, to some extent, maybe what we don't have is the capacity to transform our resources, the capacity to transform what we have into usable goods. And that requires that we invest in education. I think we need the skills. Our universities need to be able to produce people who can give us possibilities for technology. So we need those type of education. We need to invest in math and science, in physics. Without investing in education to be capable to utilize these resources on the continent, I think we are doomed. They will continue to extract our resources and export them.
Dr. Claude Kabemba, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to have to cut you short there, but thank you for offering some of those solutions when it comes to the big problem of eradicating poverty across the continent.